is that one of the best solutions to an undersized duct system is to put in a smaller piece of equipment. The thing is, if you fix the ductwork, seal it, and so on, that helps a lot. You can often, salvage half a ton to a ton of capacity. But if their attic has got like R11 insulation and it leaks like a Swiss cheese, well, why not also have a partnership with a company that can suck, seal, and blow and redo your load calc to take that into account? Then you can seal that duct system and maybe just put a better, lower resistance air cleaner on there instead of having to engineer and install a whole brand new duct system.
Welcome to the Flow Lab, the podcast where we dive deep into the science of building performance and HVAC innovations. Today we bring you another insightful episode aimed to enhance your knowledge and expertise in the field. Joining us are your co-hosts, Ben Walker, co-CEO of RetroTech, and Sam Myers, a renowned building science specialist and RetroTech trainer. Together, they bring a wealth of experience and knowledge to ensure our discussions are both informative and engaging. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to enter the Flow Lab, where we'll explore the world of building performance. Let's get started.
All right, well, welcome back to the Flow Lab podcast. Ben Walker, Sam Myers.
Yeah, we're going to keep diving down the road here with Brendan Reid. It was such a good episode. We're going to cut this one into two sections. So just going to enjoy more of his insights on the sales approach to home performance and the HVAC trades, and hear a little bit more about the beginnings of home performance and how it all began.
Yeah, awesome, man. It's like a mini series on Netflix.
Exactly.
All right, enjoy.
I always thought that would be a good application for aero barrier too.
Oh yeah.
Like if it fails, I mean, that's a lot of times there's places that you can't get behind. It's hard to seal by hand, but if you can treat the equipment that's in there, get it covered and sealed and just let it do its thing, then you can bring that number down so it'll pass the test.
Yeah, I think the aero barrier, and then they are experimenting with that, but the aero barrier's got applications to do sealed attics and crawl space encapsulation, and of course multifamily, stopping contamination going from unit to unit.
Sure.
So I actually haven't had much direct involvement with aero barrier division at all. I mean, I've just been a big fan of it. So, but absolutely, it's the way to go. And for new construction, there's no reason not to now. The problem we always had in the R2000 program was the transformation of the trades to build an airtight house and not make like heavy penetration would be a problem because people want to just punch through this unsupported 6 mil visqueen plastic, and then what do you do with that hole, right? So whereas if you just rely on the drywall and a sealant like aero barriers, it's a done deal. So you didn't have to transform every single sub-trades what they do on the job and the holes they'll punch into it so much. So I've been pretty excited about that. So I guess, so these days, since it's been about 10 years ago since I had an ownership position in any companies, and I've been very pleased with just helping contractors, helping AeroSeal directly for a few years, and then been sort of semi-retired, more than semi since the pandemic. But AeroSeal did ask me to start creating an online learning platform for sales, which is to help with that. So we started that project for about a year in. Then they had a change of middle management, and the decision was it would be better for me just to take that and offer it to the dealers as a separate service, for a small monthly subscription and so on. So that's what I'm focused on right now. So we're just rolling that out.
And that's what the more clear and clean air, is that the initiative?
The organization name is More Clean Air. And I came up with that partly, it's hard to come up with a name that describes everything we do right in this field.
Yeah.
But my observation was when I was working with homeowners buying duct repairs, especially, it's kind of cool to get a 90% reduction in CFM leakage.
Yeah.
Or to bring the static pressure from 1.1 down to 0.55, or to go from MERV nothing to MERV 16.
MERV gripping.
The thing is, homeowners don't want techno jargon. What they want is more clean air coming out of their vents.
Yeah.
And so
to be comfortable.
To be comfortable.
Be able to sleep at night.
Basic print level,
affordable.
Yeah.
They want peace of mind. They don't have to worry about stuff. And so, trying to keep things simple. So that's one thing I was going to offer for the audience here is that I'll put a cheat sheet, I guess I call it. It's a PDF that they can download. Go to morecleanair.com/RetroTech. We'll put the cheat sheet in there. And what it is the six of my favorite analogies to communicate duct leakage and duct sealing to homeowners.
I love it.
Good. Homeowners just you got to talk at their level.
Yeah.
They're not stupid. Well, some of them are, but most people aren't stupid, but they are ignorant. And
Sure.
all the stuff that we do is stuff they don't like to have to think about. They think about heating and air every 10 to 20 years. Some people have never bought a heating and air before in their lives, and they're 50, 60 years old, and now they got to buy one. And so teaching in a way that's engaging and the light bulb, you get those light bulb moments is so critical. Just a couple of them, of course, you're very familiar with these, Sam, is that, your house is like your body, and the heart of your system is the furnace and air.
Yeah.
The ductwork is the veins and arteries.
Yeah.
I love using the any parallels that I can make to the healthcare industry.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody's been to the doctor for something. They understand how it works.
Yeah.
And as far as like, somebody who just does diagnostic testing, whether it's an energy auditor or HERS rater, somebody like that, I mean, they're kind of like the, just like the family doctor, right? You have the symptom, that's who you call, they run some tests, and then they refer you to whatever surgeon or specialist you need to go to from there. So, I mean, they're already used to that. And so it's just the same thing, but for your house.
Absolutely. Well, of course, all the duct pressure, it's the same thing as blood pressure. It was another good analogy. Another one that's good for AeroSeal is that AeroSeal seals the ductwork the same way your body heals a cut on your finger.
Nice.
It's like
I
a
like
plate
that.
that's forming on the cut, right?
Yeah.
But probably one of my favorite analogies is that buying a new high-efficiency heating and air system without fixing the old ductwork is kind of like buying a high fuel efficiency hybrid car and then driving it around with a leak in the gas tank and the tires half flat.
Yep.
It just doesn't get
Yeah. That's
Another
great.
one is that if you don't buy from a company like ours, to be frank, Bob and Betty, and you risk buying from another company, downgrading the project and only getting the equipment, it's kind of like you buy a high efficiency system, but their installers will come out and slap a low efficiency unit in your house, but charge you for a high efficiency. You'd be okay with that? Homeowner goes, no. Would you like to hear a different perspective? Would you like to hear how to not make that happen? And it keeps the conversation alive. But those kind of analogies make sense to people, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. It helps,
But I think that's what I found with sales. Like, I'm an accidental salesperson and sales trainer, largely because you realize pretty quick, if you talk technical to people and talk over them,
they're just going to go to sleep on you.
Yeah.
they go to sleep on you. And so you got
They're not invested.
But there's more to it than analogies. Analogies is just one of, oh my God, there's probably 20 distinct skills that I've learned good communicators have in this field. And there's just so much to it. Like one of the very powerful ones, I'll just drop this nugget here, is you've got to learn how to teach with questions. Okay.
Like to
And
keep the
so
audience engaged,
Well, it's so easy to just make statements at people, right? And that is like, Bob and Betty, the Department of Energy says the typical duct system wastes 25 to 40%.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that that's good because we included a third-party reference, like an authority. That's good. But it's still a statement. And a statement is like an opinion. Everyone's got one, right? And but the smart way to engage people is you can turn almost any statement into a question just by saying, hey, Bob and Betty, were you aware that the Department of Energy has discovered that the typical duct system wastes 25 to 40%? So you put that upward inflection and ask it as a question, but I've still made the statement, right?
Yeah.
So were you aware? Did you know? Those kind of things. And that opens up. Another great one is, hey, Bob and Betty, in your research that you've been doing before having folks like me come out to talk to you about your new system, has anyone mentioned to you yet? And then you just explain some of the research that about, and again, it's all about keeping people engaged and having them not just fall asleep on you.
Sure.
But it's like one thing, I took Spanish in high school for a few years, and I've got a Spanish Mexican son-in-law too. So I'm very somewhat familiar with the Spanish language. I'll tell you the one thing that I can still remember, apart from a few words from my Spanish in high school, is that if you're reading Spanish and you come upon a question, in English, the question mark is at the end of the sentence.
Oh, yeah.
In Spanish, they put one at the end of the sentence, but they put another one upside down at the beginning of the sentence. And that is very smart.
Yeah.
Because you know as you're reading it that I'm about to read a question.
Yeah.
And it's not always obvious, right? So we do that naturally with our tone and our inflection. right? So your tonality when you're speaking with customers has to vary many different ways. There's so many different tones that you have to get the message across. And people read body language and tonality far more than they actually hear the words. So that's a lot of what we do is mastering that type of communication. I'll give you one last sort of sales tip that's been it was a big realization for me. It must be almost 30 years ago. And it was actually came from a sales trainer contractor from the roofing industry of all things. A guy named Richard Kaler. He's passed away since, but he's a very good man, very, very ahead of his time. But one thing that he taught me was the importance of not taking the first sales objection too seriously. Now, we're not saying ignore it, but when if you ask a customer to buy from you, and that's probably the universal mistake is most guys that are amateur salespeople don't actually ask a clear question that gives the customer the clue that, hey, they can buy now.
Yeah.
And there's like I've got about 10 favorites, but assume that you did ask in a very fairly clear and direct way, and the customer knows it's now time to poop or get off the pot. What a lot of people will do is give you a stall, which is, hey, we need to think about it, or can you send us the proposal or whatever. Or they'll actually spout off something like a price objection, like it's way too much money, which is very common trying to offer duct repairs and IEQ solutions on service costs, for example. Customers think of sticker shock, right? It's like, whoa. So there's a lot of things we can do to reduce the chance of getting sticker shock and to prepare them for it. But one of the key messages I'd like to share with our audience here is simply that when a client gives you that first objection, there's like 3 initial steps that have to happen. The first one is the first 10 seconds. What you basically don't interrupt a customer when they're responding to your request to buy. That's rule number 1. Try to slip in 3 to 5 seconds of silence because a lot of people haven't stopped talking. Give them a chance to actually, because people speak in chunks, right? And so they'll often go, well, they say, literally, I've had it happen to me. They say, well, we're really going to need to think about this. And you just say nothing for a few more seconds. And many times they'll say, it's just a lot of money, a lot more than we expected. Bingo. They don't need to think about it. What they're really telling you is it's a money objection, right? So either they don't perceive the value, or you've got an affordability challenge. You might talk about financing or whatever. But anyway, the next thing is your initial response has to be a very disarming response, right? People are used to salespeople either fighting or freezing or fleeing. Right. When they throw an objection at them, and the flee is the worst. And that's what a lot of amateur salespeople do, is say, well, okay, well, I guess, let us know what you think, if you never want to do it, and they escape. So the first thing you want to do is just basically say, I hear you. And and there's a lot of things you can do with it, depending on the nuance to it. But ultimately, I just like to say, there's no question. I absolutely agree. This is not pocket change to get these problems fixed once and for all. And you just acknowledge it and show that you're kind of on their side. There's like 4 or 5 different ways you can say it. But ultimately, the next thing you want to do is find a way to ask for the business again. And this is what's amazing is, in the smoothest way I was taught years ago, is called the safe harbor close, where you basically just explain how when people do feel comfortable moving ahead, Bob and Betty, there's a couple of different ways they take care of the money. Now, some people just write a check, other people put it on their credit card because they want to get those airline points and things like that. But a lot of people, they use other people's money. And there's a couple of ways they can do that. We can either break it into 12 equal pieces, no interest, or we can break it into really small pieces, probably as low as about $80 a month on this one. When you guys are feeling comfortable to go ahead, which way do you think would make most sense for you guys? And it's amazing how many people just go, well, tell me more about that financing one, or that $81. How can we pay that off? What's the interest rate? And that's why we call it a safe harbor, is because you're giving them a chance to get back into the conversation. And basically just get used to the idea that they're buying. And the problem is, we're not being of service to them if we pack up and leave, right? They want to do it. It's just they're having a spasmodic, knee-jerk, literally often uncontrollable response. Anyway, so these are sort of the things that I'm finding. So ultimately what it comes down to is, I got into this through building science and airflow science. And what I've learned, and I find it just as fascinating now, is behavioral science, basically applied sales psychology. And how all the ways that people think and how people want to buy and be treated is the next frontier, really. It's always been an issue for us techno nerds to overcome that and to understand it. But it is explainable. There is a science to it.
Yeah.
And I think the education part of the conversation at the beginning is a key factor to, whether if that customer is going to come back later or not, because now you've given them the questions to ask. So if they speak with another contractor, now they know about duct leakage. They know about the enclosure air tightness. They know about how all this stuff works. And if they're meeting with another contractor that's just trying to sell them something they don't need, one of the many indoor air quality snake oil products that are out there, or an oversized system without doing a manual J, now they know what to ask. And if they're, stumbling or not providing the answers that make sense, then likely they'll come back.
That actually is a tactic that I teach, which is if you aren't going to get the job, and that you may be the first person they've talked to, which happens. Well, in that case, a lot of people will be uncomfortable pulling the trigger and buying from the first contractor they meet with, but at least you've set the bar high, right?
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
And so I actually teach, you should actually, if it looks like you're going to leave there without a job, you want to do two things. So number one is book a firm follow-up date and time and method to be back in communication, either a revisit or a Zoom meeting, and you offer to take off your salesperson hat, put on your consultant hat, and help them evaluate the bids. And if you've built a foundation of trust and rapport at that point, a lot of people will actually be okay with that. And the other thing you want to do is set a bit of a bear trap for the other guy to step into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you basically say, if I could just make a suggestion, Bob and Betty, what a lot of other customers have found really helpful is to not tell the next people they talk to what they've learned. Just wait and see what they bring up, and you evaluate how do they compare with their thoroughness and what they're proposing to do for you with what we've talked about here tonight, and what the Energy Star and the Department of Energy and Duke Power and all these groups recommend. Just see what they say, and don't let on that you're actually more educated than the average client.
Than they know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very, then you really have set the bear trap for the other guy to just put his foot into.
Yeah.
And,
Yep. Exactly.
the one actually very interesting thing about the opportunity of being in heating and air sales is that there are very few professional salespeople really in heating and air. There's thousands of them, but still, relatively speaking, the chances that a homeowner is actually met with an ethical, knowledgeable, and good communicating salesperson that not ashamed of having a higher initial investment but lower total cost, the chances are pretty low that you're running into that. So it's not hard. You just have to be a bit better than mediocre to do pretty well.
Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff being said out there for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of companies that, every salesperson has the same plan to sell a piece of equipment that they probably don't need before they even get to the driveway to see what the problem is. So we see a lot of that.
That's one of the things that frustrates me about, my shall we say, partially achieved mission of encouraging heating and air companies to get more into home performance totally, is that one of the best solutions to an undersized duct system is to put in a smaller piece of equipment. And the thing is, if you fix the ductwork, seal it, and so on, that helps a lot. You can often, salvage half a ton to a ton of capacity. But if their attic has got like R11 insulation and it leaks like a Swiss cheese, why not also have a partnership with a company that can suck, seal, and blow, and redo your load calc to take that into account, and then you can seal that duct system and maybe just put a better, lower resistance air cleaner on there instead of having to engineer and install a whole brand new duct system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
exactly.
I think
make that manual J work out. So
yeah, make it work, and that's one of my favorite quotes. I'd rather have an airtight duct system that was a bit low on airflow than a system that had the right airflow and had a bit of duct leakage. And that is so true. The math and the science of this is a 10% low on airflow, like going from 400 CFM per ton down to 360, will typically in a humid climate, if you've got a TXV, a 1 to 2% drop in total capacity. That's all. And I'm not saying low airflow, like way down, below 300 is good, but 10% low on airflow is negligible impact on total capacity, and it improves the dehumidification. But a 10% duct leak can have a 30% impact on capacity and efficiency.
Yeah.
So I think that these issues, a lot of guys get paralyzed thinking, I shouldn't seal up the ductwork at all. It's rare over the years that I've seen, there have been for sure, but it's rare that I've seen duct sealing on its own crater a system. It has happened, but this system's got to be in really bad shape for that to happen. And more commonly what happens, especially now with so much variable speed going out there, the unit ramps up. It's noisier. It uses more electricity. Produces more motor heat. It's not ideal, but at least it's airtight if you've done like AeroSeal on it. So that's part of my mission with More Clean Air, is actually to help the AeroSeal dealers that haven't been fully trained on diagnosing undersized returns and filter problems and clogged coils and all these things, and teach them how to diagnose and package up a bigger project. Because typically, one of my favorite sayings I came up with years ago is that a great duct system is clean, airtight, and it's got the airflow right.
Yeah.
That's a More Clean Air maxim that I teach and live by.
I just wanted to go back to like the very first test that you and Sebastian did on his house. And like, if you guys had any idea about like the actual target pressures you were trying to achieve, or like the 50 pascals, was that a thing back then? Or like what?
Yeah, well, I think the protocol, I think we took guidance from National Research Council.
Okay.
And everything was at 50 pascals. I think that was a Swedish protocol from about 10 or 20 years earlier.
Okay.
The Swedes are kind of credited with leading this. And so Rob Dumont at the Saskatchewan Research Council, and Bob Evans, there was another PhD scientist at NRC. The protocol of doing a multi-point test was fairly well
established by then.
By even then.
Okay.
And so there was a fair bit of back and forth on the CGSB committee about, where do we calculate equivalent leakage area, right? There's this whole 10 Pascal versus the Lawrence Berkeley Labs effective leakage area at 4 pascals. All that stuff, we kind of went around in circles a lot, and it's all compromises. Everything's artificial, and it's induced. But no, those 50 pascals, we would typically go to about 60 and come down in 5 pascal increments, down to about down to, I think the CGSB standard eventually said to go to 10, but we learned that we trusted our number calculated at 10 if we stopped at 20.
Yeah.
With everything being more automated now, with the the software and the transducers, it's possible to do really clean multi-point tests.
Yeah.
But we learned a long time ago that a bad multi-point test, especially if you're extrapolating, was often worse than a single point test.
Yeah.
And so for the typical rating test, the other thing is that the protocols often got too doctrinaire, but you had to do it a certain way with no latitude for the context. Like if you passed by with flying colors, why do you need to do a multi-point test? And by conversely, if you failed by flying colors,
right,
or by if your ship sank, well, why do it? So and that's I've always been frustrated that there's always been this struggle, this pull, right, between we want to scientifically be very defendable and know that we're doing the right thing, but that often gets in the way of implementation and scalability.
Yeah.
Sam, you were probably, did you get any training or involvement with Advanced Energy when John Tooley was there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So John, a definitely big pioneer in this whole thing. And he was definitely more practical than most. But man, a lot of the programs at Advanced Energy, the Duke had, the other programs that popped up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they tried to turn every single house into a science project.
Yeah.
And I'd say Sebastian and I are partly responsible for that. No, I mean, we're the ones who basically said, shoot, you can get negative pressure, a little backdraft of water heater, if you just fart in the wrong direction. And unfortunately, people took that too seriously.
Yeah.
And I remember Seb did a wonderful test once where he had scuba equipment. He was a scuba diver. And so we had one of the earliest Manoxers, the Manoxer 2, for measuring carbon monoxide from back row.
Oh, sure.
And I remember he took that and he put a scuba tank on, and he put the blower door in the front door of his house. He sent his wife and kids off to the mall or something. And he fired up the furnace and put the house into a full negative pressure to get a full backdraft. And he sat there with the scuba tank on, sitting on a stool, reading the carbon monoxide.
Oh, wow.
Guess how high it got?
It'd be awesome if there was some video clip of that somewhere like that.
Yeah.
It got to 0.
Oh, well.
Wow.
A full backdraft is one of the safest things you can do with a furnace, because you've got air coming down the chimney and the combustion gases get spilled away from the burners and don't get re-entrained. And so you don't get carbon monoxide production unless you get, major flame distortion, something like that. But on most furnaces, especially with the old style dilution port, they would just dump into the furnace room. But then whatever's sucking on the house, in this case a blower door, is causing lots of ventilation.
Yeah.
And right at the equipment, the air that's ventilating it is coming down the chimney. So this stuff is pretty confusing if you think, oh, it's all so horrible. No, the worst thing to have is a bird's nest.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
and nothing to do with negative pressure, testing and closing doors and supply leak sucking and all that stuff. But anyway, you know all that stuff. But it's I would say I don't have the answer, but it's going to always be a struggle. Is how do we compromise between the science of how to be perfect
And then the profitability side of trying to just run a business.
or how to help the environment? How do we have the biggest impact on people's lives? But of course, the reason why it got so tied up in knots is because of health and safety.
Yeah.
Or you never want to be responsible for killing your customers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I would say routinely oversizing, putting in a bigger furnace or a bigger air conditioner on an old furnace with an orphaned water heater with return leaks in the combustion zone. That's something heating air guys would do routinely. They're much more likely to kill someone with that than they were by, doing an attic air seal.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's there's no easy answers to all that stuff.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing I think about a lot as far as like how can we use what we know to do more good. And one thing that I keep getting frustrated with is the constant use of the word energy auditor. All of this stuff is in the energy codes, where really, like, if the phone is going to ring, it is not an energy related problem.
Well,
I
actually,
really wish we would move past this and come up with a better name for what we do and where we
Well, no,
apply this stuff.
I realized that, Sam, years ago. We never called what we taught guys to do was a whole house assessment or a comfort checkup.
Yeah.
But we never used
Or
the term
comfort
energy.
consult is the term that a lot of HVAC companies are using now. I like that because, when people are uncomfortable, that's when they're going to pick up the phone and call somebody.
Well, I remember, we realized this really early on, and I remember a great conversation I had with Andrew Ozer. He was the sales manager at a big heating and air company in the DC area. And he actually analyzed the numbers, and he said the worst lead they get for an energy audit is someone who says their primary motivation is to save energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the best lead is someone who had a comfort issue.
Yeah.
Or an air quality issue. His insight, which was obvious when he said it to me, is what they've learned their mission has to be: if someone comes to you with an energy concern, you need to start digging quickly to find out if there is also a comfort or a clean air concern. And if there is, then it's a good lead. But if there isn't, it's not. And one of the things I realized years ago is the people who are concerned about their energy bills, they don't like paying high bills. Well, oftentimes it's because they're friggin' cheap. And if they're friggin' cheap, they don't buy the repairs either.
Yeah.
It's like,
And the
So it's
repairs aren't free.
no. And so the
Yeah.
very person who's motivated to try to save a few bucks just looks at a $10,000 project,
And then
if
they
that's
say,
what it's going to be or
"No way."
more, and goes, "Oh," and they do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Maybe those
so,
energy bills aren't so bad.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
yeah, no, the best one is the person who says, they're kind of high, but I wouldn't mind paying it if I was comfortable. If I had a nickel for every time I heard that in the last 40 years,
Yeah, man.
you're rich.
Yeah.
Because that's true. A lot of people have no problem paying. Like the average in America that I run into is still only around 200 and some bucks a month for total utility bills.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal
Yeah.
for most people anymore. That's not. I mean, these days, I think half the voters in the country say that the eggs are more of a concern for them.
Yeah,
The price
right,
of
yeah.
eggs is more of a concern than $200 a month. But the point is that the utility bills people don't generally care about. So you could have a neighbor to that house that's got a $400 bill.
Yeah.
And I've had some that are, like 3, 4, 5,000 a month bills on some really big multi-systems, especially with real problems. So they're out there, but the average person trying to sell this just on payback and
Yeah,
energy is
doesn't work,
is
yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It has to just be to further support the pains that they want resolved. And so we're really big in my training on how to open a conversation, how to get permission to ask questions about pain. And then the key thing is to agitate the pain. You've got to stick the knife in there and twist it. You've got to pour salt in the wound. You've got to remind them how horrible that
Yeah.
bedroom is in the summertime. You got to, and you got to paint the picture, we call future pacing, of what their life could be like if they had, cooler, drier air in the summer and less smelly smells coming up from their crawl space. They wouldn't be ashamed of having, when guests come over. And,
Yeah.
I remember one gal she was a young wife, young mom, and we got to talking, and she let her guard down. She admitted her biggest fear was her mother-in-law coming over, seeing dust on the furniture after she just cleaned the house a day or two earlier, and saying she was a bad housekeeper for her son. Yeah, it's like,
that was worth it.
but I tell you, the motivations that people have, that's perfectly their right. If that's, and so what would cause her to get her house fixed was to reduce the dust so that she
Wouldn't be
would
embarrassed,
not make her mother-in-law mad.
Yeah. Let's take a look at those leaky return ducts in the attic.
Yep. Well, it might have been leaky
Yeah.
supply ducts, actually. I found supply duct leakage and powered attic ventilators cause more dust problems than return leakage. Most return leakage gets caught by the best filter in the system, which is the wet
I guess
coil.
it depends on where the filter is. Yeah. Yeah.
That wet coil is a great filter. And that's another thing the technical ignorance that our industry has. They don't understand that filters were originally designed to stop rocks and birds from getting into the blower wheel. And that's all they were for. And back then, our fins on the air conditioning coils were wide apart, and we didn't have secondary heat exchangers on 90% furnaces. The technology has totally changed. The coils now are basically dirt catchers, and they don't self-rinse off the way they used to. Stuff gets plugs them up. And, ASHRAE actually in the 62 standard requires MERV 6 on all intake air. Well, that's because they did testing and they found that the average wet coil is about a MERV 5. So you'd need a better filter to protect the coil than the coil itself. So, I'm a big fan of, it's a bit sacrilegious, but I'm actually a big fan of double filtration. And, the classic way we do it, of course, is to put two, big air cleaners in parallel so that we get more surface area. And that, if you can do that, that's wonderful. But my personal system I put in 20 years ago has got two stacked in series, and I've got a MERV 8 big 20 by 25 2-inch pre-filter, and I've got a 5-inch deep April Air. It's actually nominally a MERV 11 media, but it's got an electronic boost to it. But anyway, and I replace that 2-inch filter twice a year, and I replace the April Air about every 5 years. So I'm not saying all you listeners that you should do that every system, but I get the same static pressure drop across my pre-filters I get across the main air cleaner. You guys familiar with John Ellis has got a new
The DF16?
product?
I was going to ask you if you've seen that. Yeah.
I have,
It's
and
slick.
I haven't asked him if he's going to come up with a sort of a compatible manufactured pre-filter rack, but that's what I would do with it. Depending, you'd have to know the system, but if you've just got a 2 or 3 ton system, and you put that big filter, I'd put a MERV 6, MERV 8, probably those. I get those 2-inch MERV 8 pre-filters. They're from Camfil Far. They're like $3 each. You buy a case of them, and it's because the thing is that a MERV 8 filter gets rid of everything you can see. It's like 90% efficient at 10 microns or bigger, and so it gets loaded up. But my April Air, it just turns black after. But it's all those little. But there's nothing on it.
Huh.
So anyway, I'm kind of blathering here, but I geek out on this stuff all the time.
No, you've got me thinking for sure.
Yeah, no, well, I think and the other thing is, a pre-filter with a filter grill, one of the worst things you can ever do is have a filter and a filter grill if you've got duct leakage.
Yeah.
But if you've got a
It's all
sealed return,
bypassed.
yeah, if you've got a sealed return, I'm a big fan of catching the big stuff before it gets into the ductwork, but you don't need a really resistant filter. Don't put a MERV 13 in there. Put a MERV 6 or so, and change it every couple of months. And then your honking big MERV 14, 16 filter at the equipment, you really would get many years out of it. But I can tell you, a lot of the houses I've looked at, I'd never want to put myself a MERV 16 filter without a pre-filter.
Yeah.
It's just you're wasting it.
Yeah.
And
That makes sense. I just moved mine from a filter grill to the, I put an oversized media filter by the air handler now, but now I'm going to put a pre-filter on it and see what the static pressure does.
Yeah, just don't go crazy. And make return grills got to be big. And bigger is better with return grills. But anyway, we're way off topic here. But I geek out on all this stuff and I love it. But
we might get a couple episodes out of this one.
Yeah, well, fine. But here's the problem: is we can geek out on all this all day long, but nothing happens till someone sells something.
Yeah.
And so you've got to. if you're in this business, I think that was one of the questions you'd ask me to ponder is, what would I recommend and give advice to younger people in the business? If you can learn how to communicate, which basically in our business means how to sell ethically, you'll never go hungry.
Yeah.
Right. And it's far more important to really dive. Like once you get to a certain level of understanding of airflow science and building science, you're going to get a bigger return for your career and for helping people by just understanding how to communicate. That's again what I've kind of come out of retirement now with this new initiative that I'll be launching in 2025 with More Clean Air, specifically to help get that communication across. How do we keep it simple, and how do we run a call? There's a process to running a call that is, and you've picked up, Sam, on a few of the points already. But how do you do that in a way that people feel comfortable buying and don't feel like they got sold? Right. That's always the challenge.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm excited to see that unfold next year.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Yeah,
I'll give you guys a sneak preview for sure.
Well, Brendan, thanks for all the work you've done for just kind of laying the track for us, because we're doing what we're doing because of what you did at the beginning.
Yeah,
so.
one of the first pioneers.
Yeah. It has been fun. It's still fun, but I will say that I always like to see advances in the technical side of things. But I can say that when you really start looking into consumer buying psychology and learning how to comfortably communicate, that's something you can learn something new every day.
Yeah.
It's never going to get
practice. I mean, you're not going to knock it out of the park on the first one.
Man.
I mean, my big presentation when I started my first one for RetroTech, Ben, I'm glad you guys weren't there because I bombed it. It was awful. But just gotten better ever since. So it just, like anything else, it takes practice and it takes work.
Yeah. You have to fail before you succeed or whatever.
Well,
Exactly.
I mean, here's a sad thing I'll share with you. We'll close with this thought. Professional athletes in their working time practice 95% of the time, and they play 5%.
Yeah.
Amateur salespeople practice less than 1% of the time, and they play in the field, practicing on their customers 99% of the time. And that I think it lays bare the stark reality that you've got to take communication and understanding psychology and the principles of ethical persuasion. You've got to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And if you do, and you're constantly studying it, you will achieve wonderful things for yourself and your family. And you will be helping more people, and you'll be helping the environment and helping our national security, because ultimately nothing happens till someone sells something.
Yeah. That's
exactly. I love it.
And all selling is helping people solve their problems.
That's right.
Yeah.
Leave it with you guys. All right. Thanks. And thanks for what you do, both of you.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on and joining us.
Yeah, definitely.
Keep carrying that torch. And I love the new products I'm seeing from RetroTech, and I love being able to use them out in the field too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Okay.
Hey, awesome.
See you next time.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Take care.